Overwatch 2 might have a support power creep problem, and that's kind of something I want to discuss today. Hi, everybody. My name is Abby. Welcome to the video. I think it's not a surprise anymore that the Season 9 changes have done more damage to the game than actually repair anything, especially since progressively over time after Season 9, they gave tanks their breakpoints back and they giga buffed them with all sorts of passives and armor changes and all of that. So tank has definitely been given a lot of love, but on this side, I felt like a role that's being given even more love has been support, and DPS as a role just kind of gets messed around with. And honestly, it's a little bit crazy that DPS as a role doesn't get the tender love and care that support does. So to start talking about it, let's review some of the changes that have happened in Overwatch 2 post season 9. So starting off, I want to go over to Ana, and you can see these are the changes that Ana has gotten progressively throughout the year. And my goodness, man, outside of one change that is extremely negligible, all of these have just been buffs. Like it's nothing but buffs. So check this out. First of all, Ana's biotic grenade now does 90 damage. We also have certain characters that have 225 HP, and Tracer has 175, and this 90 damage grenade is crazy when you think about it, right? Not to mention the sleep dart nerf, like I said, is negligible. And then you look at over biotic rifle, her damage and her healing have gone up from 70 to 75. I think this is one of those things where Ana's gun just does both, and they share the same value, so they cannot make it separate, if I'm not mistaken. So she's definitely gotten a buff over here. So overall, her healing has been increased from the nade and the damage on it, and then the damage and healing over here. Now, did Ana need it? Yes, because the new breakpoints have proven one thing for us is the new breakpoints just isn't, it doesn't feel good. It's making duels that are supposed to be like favoring one side just not happen. I don't know how to best word this. As you guys know, English isn't my first language, but it has caused a lot of damage to the way breakpoints and interactions work. The fact that Ana needs a one extra shot into most things is ridiculous. But now that she is being given this buff, it makes you question why isn't DPS, or at least some of the DPS's or most of the DPS's breakpoints, not being adjusted as well. Moving on over, I think by far the biggest culprit of power creep post season 9, and this character wasn't even bad post season 9. Post season 9, Moira was one of the best supports to be played throughout ladder. And this is what's happened to Moira. So post season 9, check out your screen right now. Look at this real quick. So biotic grab's damage per second was decreased down to 60, but her coalescence's self-healing was increased. So this was like, okay, fine, sure. Like this was when Moira was actually very strong, and then they adjusted her. However, over time, then they got a bit like, a bit excited, and then they were like, you know what? Moira's ultimate didn't feel threatening enough after the HP changes. So guys, the support ultimate was actually supporting the team and being used to enable pushes and not farm brain-rotting TikTok clips. So then they decided they want their brain-rotting TikTok clips back, and they buffed up Coalescence from 70 to 85 damage. It's crazy. And then recently, they decided that Moira wasn't that adversely affected by the move to 225, but she could use a small boost to survivability and increase her self-healing. My problem with both of the developer comments over here is clearly they say that, oh yeah, by the way, Moira's not that bad, but here's a buff. Oh yeah, by the way, Moira's not that bad, but here's another buff. And it's like, what is this bias, brother? Like, what about the other breakpoints? What about Soldier 76? What about Genji? What about Cassidy's range not being compensated for the new HP boost? Like, it is so awkward to see them like tender love and care, support roles so delicately, patch per patch per patch, and just forget about the DPS role. Moving on to another character, check out Zenyatta, right? Zenyatta saw a Transcendence cost decrease, right? And then he just outright saw buffs to Discord Orb, the cooldown moving down to 6 seconds, and then they just buffed his raw damage. They just buffed his raw damage. Orb of Destruction, damage has been increased from 48 to 50. Just raw damage increase, right? Raw damage increase. No other like compensation, nerf or something, just raw buff. Even though Zen isn't that bad, he's just kind of situational, right? So moving over to Lucio, he's not really one of the supports that has gotten that much of a power creep. He's still really powerful in the current day and meta game. It's just one of those things where Lucio will always be strong because of his AoE healing and his speed boost potential to enable plays. And as you can see, his changes are like, the damage was increased from 35 to 45 on the sound wave. They kind of redistributed his damage. So it's easier for him to take duels, but he cannot spam more pressure in team fights. To be honest, the Sonic Amplifier damage per projectile decrease is so negligible that it's like you can actually ignore it. And he still feels very strong. They did reduce the knockback a little bit, although this was not a problem. Moving over to Baptiste, he got one of the craziest changes of all time with the biotic launcher. Primary fire recoil was reduced by 30%. If you actually play with the current Baptiste, it genuinely feels like he has zero recoil. This was the one thing that Baptiste players need to do that actually required some genuine amount of skill to control their recoil, to control their aim, and be able to do tons of burst damage. And now it's made so much easier. And their comment is, this change is aimed at reducing the fatigue resulting from playing BAP for longer periods of time, basically, is what they're trying to say. And look, I try my level best to be fair to support players. I try my level best because I also play support. I love the role. I think the role is great. It's actually the best role in the game right now. Most fun role to play. You want to have some fun, Q support. You want to be depressed and miserable, play DPS. You want to be a punching bag simulator, play tank. But by all means, if you actually play the new Baptiste, my goodness, his damage potential, if you know how to aim with him, oh my god, you can get a 2k every fight. You can win almost every single duel. It is crazy, and it's Mr. 305, Mr. 305 different HP bars because they just refuse to nerf what makes him strong. And overall, he just gets buffed anyway. He gets a net buff anyway. It's crazy because if anything, Baptiste needed a nerf. Moving over Brigitte. So Brigitte is one of those characters that hasn't necessarily been power creep, but because D.Va saw like D.Va is seeing more plays nowadays and she's become a lot more prominent, Brigitte has begun to kind of fit in really well into the game. Not to mention she has great synergy with Juno. Now, I'm not going to talk about Juno in this video. I think we've talked about her more than enough. But Brig has not been a character that's been adjusted too much or been given buffs. She has been nerfed quite a bit, I will say. So I will be fair. Brigitte is like the only area where the character has genuinely been nerfed rather than actually buffed. And you guys can see the changes on the screen right now, right? Illari is also one of those characters where they just couldn't find a spot for her to feel better. But then they did buff her over time. One of the biggest changes was that they tightened the explosion radius for the Sunstruck when it comes to colliding with objects, which makes it much more consistent to hit. They made the recovery time on her weapon even faster, so you're shooting faster, but then they nerfed the damage just a little bit. However, the craziest changes to Illari by far was the fact that the Sun Outburst damage, got a damage increase from 10 to 25, and her healing pylon saw a genuine number increase from 30 to 40. It is nerfed against Illari, but that is irrelevant. And also, it saw an HP bar increase for no reason from 100 to 125. Before we continue with this video, why do we keep buffing the HP bars on buildables? I understand if you wanted to move increasing the HP bar for heroes, but why are you increasing buildables as HP bars? Have you guys tried interacting with the new Symmetra teleporter? That thing just feels like it will never die. So Symmetra's like teleporter plays are almost guaranteed now, because unless you have 5 people shooting at it, that thing is going to stay up for at least 2 seconds before it goes down. Moving over to Kiriko, she is the one that's been on the receiving end lately of some buffs. Now, to be fair, in their words, Kiriko is kind of underperforming and she's a bit of on the weaker side of supports. Although a lot of arguments can be made here as to why that might be the case. You could argue that Juno Brig meta kind of holds Kiriko back from taking over. Some people say that Juno's kind of a more upgraded Kiriko now, so that's just power keep for you in general. So I don't know if Kiriko really deserved these changes or not, but here's the changes that Kiriko's gotten post-season 9, the ones that stand out to me. So the first thing they did, outside of giving her 225 HP, which was desperately needed, they actually reworked the way 𝐒𝐿9 works. So they made it so that body shots did more damage, and they increased the recovery time, so there's a little bit more delay before you shoot your next 𝐒𝐿9, and then they changed the way the critical multiplier works. Although overall she feels relatively the same, it's just when you're body shotting people, it will feel a little bit better. So they made the character a little bit easier. Then, in the current patch, rather than addressing the Juno Brig meta, which I still think is a strong meta composition, support composition to base your team comps around, and I don't know how they're going to approach that comp. I don't know if we need to nerf Brig or completely gutter Juno, but regardless, these were the changes that Kiriko got, where you got the 𝐒𝐿9 recovery time has been decreased back to its original value of 0.5, so you can shoot 𝐒𝐿9s a little bit faster. The Swift Step saw a decrease on the cooldown, and then Protection Suzu has now dropped to 14 seconds. So her survivability has seen a massive increase. Her duel ability has seen a little bit of an increase. So it's still a buff over time to the character. Moving over to Lifeweaver. Now, Lifeweaver has been getting nothing but buff after buff after buff after buff after buff after buff. It goes on. It's crazy. They seriously are doing nothing but number buffing this character until he actually breaks. And the worst part about Lifeweaver potentially becoming meta is he can genuinely create a budget GOATS comp. And we'll talk about it in just a second. I want you guys to check this out. In post season 9, the Tree of Life saw a healing number increase to 90. The Rejuvenating Dash saw its heal increase to 60, but then they reduced it to 45. And as a compensation, this was where he got that slight rework where his Healing Blossom is now charging passively. A Petal Platform saw its rework and things like that. So most likely they nerfed the Rejuvenating Dash because they expected that Healing Blossom will be a little bit more powerful since you can charge it passively now. That it's going to help the character. He also got the the movement speed reduction has been removed, so he's able to move around better. So this Healing Blossom Rejuvenating Dash change makes perfect sense when you think about it. Then his Thorn Volley saw an ammo increase, so his overall sustained DPS over time has been increased, and the projectiles on those things are big. Like I don't think his damage is a problem. It's just the way his animations work are so clunky. Then these recent changes is where things get really scary. Is where Tree of Life, the time before the overhealth begins to drain when out of range from the Tree of Life, has been increased from 2.5 to 6. Now, in total, in testing, assuming you take no damage, which is, I know it's not always going to be the case, but it's still scary to think about that you can enter a fight with this much HP, which is, it takes a total of 8 seconds for that overhealth to completely disappear. I have tested this myself, and you can too. It's very easy to test that. And my goodness, this can create some budget goats comp. Like it's what scares me. It's like, how many more Lifeweaver buffs? What more will it take to really push Lifeweaver? And I think we're reaching there. Now, this is where things get a little bit scarier. The life grip, when he pulls people in, saw a cooldown reduction, and the healing on it has been increased. Overall, as you can clearly see, outside of like 1 or 2 characters, healing numbers have been going up progressively per patch. Right? It's been going up. Even a character like Mercy, arguably Mercy is like currently the worst support in the game by far. No debate on this, by the way. Even though she got her HP reduced to 225, Caduceus staff saw its primary healing go up to 60, right? And the damage boost saw the number go up to 30%. Now, this didn't actually help Mercy. She's actually still the worst support in the game. But by far, my point here is you can clearly see a trend that progressively over time, post Season 9, supports have gotten nothing but genuine power creep, whether it's been in one character or another. It's been progressively happening, and my question now is, how much more do we have to see of this? And why is there no compensation towards DPS's breakpoints? I think by far the biggest standouts in DPS that desperately could use a little bit of help is number 1, Soldier 76, and number 2, Genji's Dragon Blade. I think Genji is actually a very good A-tier pick right now. However, there's no denying that Dragon Blade feels incredibly terrible to use in most cases, and more often than not nowadays is just being used to bait out cooldowns anywhere in Diamond Plus. So I don't know, like, what's your guys' takeaway from all of this? I just wanted to sit down and discuss that. Are we genuinely seeing a support power creep happening in the game? And does this mean that at a certain point when the numbers align, and as usual, we know they balance around mostly numbers, when they begin to notice that, like healing is taking over the game more and more and more over time, doesn't that mean we might be in a DPS power creep sooner than later? Maybe in the next season or the season after that, we'll see a genuine DPS, like, changes. Cassidy might get his range back. Genji might see, okay, no, who am I kidding? They're never going to buff Genji. But do you guys see where I'm kind of going with this, right? It's like, what becomes the solution? Do we nerf supports again? We know how the support community acts when their characters get nerfed. So I don't think we're going to see any nerfs to healing numbers or anything like that. The next thing I see for the game is potentially DPS power creep. Not to mention that Giga tanks are still running the game, and DPS can still struggle outside of maybe 2 picks that can deal with tanks. So I don't know. I actually just want to discuss this with you guys. Let me know your thoughts down below, and let's start discussing. And if you watched this far, thank you so much. See you in the next one.